Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm also a yoga teacher, mom of three, entrepreneur, and forever very curious student. This podcast is being recorded on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which consists of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation. In case you are brand new to the podcast, and this is the first episode that you're listening to, let me give you a little backstory of how it even came to be. It was mainly because when I left my very first 200-hour yoga teacher training, I felt like I was dropped out into the wilderness of teaching yoga and running a business. And I wanted yoga teachers, all yoga teachers, to have access to ideas, resources, and a supportive community, and a way to have that on the go, because I get how busy it can be just doing life on top of running a yoga business. So I am so grateful that you made it here to this episode today. Returning listeners, you know how grateful I am that you're up for diving into some conversations about what's happening in the world and how that relates to yoga. So in a time when access to abortion care is increasingly under threat, especially in the US, where the majority of our listeners actually are, even though I'm a Canadian yoga teacher, we have a lot of US listeners. But this threat to abortion care is happening around the world, where requests for abortion support have surged post-Roe. Understanding right now in this moment how yoga intersects with reproductive justice is more vital than ever. In today's episode, we explore how yoga teachers can support abortion care through trauma-informed, liberatory, and community-centered practices. Today's episode is powered by OfferingTree. I use and love this software in my own business because it automates everything from bookings, payments, Zoom links, reminders, and so much more. We have a special podcast listener discount code over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon, so make sure to check that out. Alrighty, let's get right into today's episode. Today, we're diving into a powerful and often under-discussed topic. This is the intersection of yoga, abortion support, and community care. Our guest is Sasha Sigel, a queer yoga teacher, Reiki practitioner, and abortion doula who co-founded Be Queer Now, a queer yoga collective. Sasha's work centers on queer and trans pelvic health and draws deeply from trauma-informed and gender-affirming practices. In their role as an abortion doula, Sasha provides emotional, practical, and informational support to people navigating abortion, reminding us that abortion is healthcare and that care can take many forms. In this conversation, we explore how the foundational values of yoga, like satya, truthfulness, and ahimsa, non-harm, can guide us in supporting people through their reproductive choices. We talk about how yoga is more than just movement. It's a liberatory practice that can offer space for validation, rest, and healing, especially for those who've experienced abortion or miscarriage. We also discuss the barriers many face when accessing care, how community doulas and yoga teachers can safely show up, and why normalizing abortion as a part of human healthcare is a crucial part of our work as compassionate space holders. Let's dive in and meet Sasha. Sasha, welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here today, and I'm really excited to dive in.
Thank you so much for having me. I am a longtime listener, so I'm really excited to be talking with you, Shannon.
Oh my gosh, the honor is all mine right now. So I love that you also listen to the podcast. Before we dive right into our topic today, where we're going to talk about yoga and abortion care, like how do these things even go together? Tell our listeners, if they don't know you, what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah. So I'm Sasha, she, her for pronouns, and I am a queer yoga teacher, a Reiki practitioner, and abortion doula. And I'm originally from Wisconsin, but now I live and work on the unceded land of the Lenape people, colonized as Brooklyn, New York. And I started practicing yoga in college and then did my first yoga teacher training in 2017 in New York. And I loved studying and teaching yoga and also found it was a great way to connect with queer community. So I started also studying trauma-informed teaching practices. And now I'm a co-founder of a queer yoga collective called Be Queer Now, where we invite queer folks to connect with our bodies and our community in some really unique ways. And another part of my path has been my personal experience with pelvic pain and endometriosis. And that led me to explore yoga for pelvic health. And so that's a big focus of my work now. And in particular, working with queer and trans folks experiencing pelvic health challenges. And of course, pelvic health is very tied to reproductive justice. So I trained to be an abortion doula after Roe was overturned in the US in 2022. So I love weaving together social justice work and healing arts work. And I find it really important to bring the trauma informed and gender affirming practices into both abortion support and pelvic yoga. So, yeah, I find it really meaningful to do this work and connect with other people doing similar work. So, I'm really happy to get to talk with you about it today.
Well, I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. And also, I'm like, how did we not connect before now? Because the pelvic health world and the yoga world is pretty tight. So I'm
Yes.
super
Yes.
glad that we're here together today. Um, Also, what do you tell people when you meet them on the street? Because that's a lot. Like people say to me all the time now, "Oh, are you still doing that yoga thing?"
Mm.
I'm like, "Wow. Yes, sort of. Yeah." Like I don't know how to answer because I know what they mean is like, "Are you still going and teaching like hot vinyasa flow or something?" That's not the case. What do you say to
Right.
people on the street?
Ugh, that's a tricky question. It's a party question, of the I teach yoga it doesn't quite cover it when you're meeting someone new. So I usually try to get into the specifics of I mostly focus on queer community building with yoga. I work more in the nonprofit sector with yoga, but not so much the Western studio scene. And I hope that gives people a little hint and then we can go further after that.
That's amazing. So if someone is sitting here like thinking, okay, well, I'm listening to the podcast, but I don't understand what abortion has to do with yoga,
Mhm.
um, what would you say to someone who's thinking like, maybe these things don't go together?
Yeah. Yeah. So, firstly, I always like to zoom out and know that we're not talking only about asana or the physical component of yoga, which actually I think there are really specific and important ways that asana can support the experience of getting an abortion. But also, we're looking at, for example, satya, truthfulness, truth telling. And we're in a place right now where there is so much misinformation and propaganda about what kind of healthcare is available to folks. And so part of our practice is finding the truth and knowing how to communicate with people and give them accurate resources. So I think there's a lot of different angles we can take. And also the sense that yoga is a liberatory practice and reproductive justice and healthcare is something that's under attack right now in terms of folks having agency over their own body.
I'm not sure if you follow Canadian politics ever, but we also have a big upheaval right now. Our leader has resigned, and the
Yes.
next leader, who it looks like he may get elected, has spoken out at different times about not being for abortion care. And I'm very passionate about this because, as you probably feel, when you start working in the healthcare world as a yoga teacher and you're specializing in pelvic health, you start to learn the facts about how abortion is healthcare.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you, like, let's say someone meets you at a party somewhere and you're not expecting it, but you get into this conversation or something comes up and you just want to nip it really quick and be like, I believe abortion is healthcare. What kind of facts do you share in that moment when you're like, I don't have a lot of time for this. I just want to make sure I get this message across. Or maybe someone's like, just hasn't thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And just to say also about the political climate, and yes, I have been tuned into the big upheaval in Canada, and in some ways it feels very similar to what happened with the Supreme Court overturning Roe, because my understanding is that at the present moment, abortion is legal and fairly accessible in Canada. I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some people say it's still difficult, and
Yes.
I'll link to a whole podcast about how abortion became legal here, and it's a fascinating podcast. Can't remember the name, but I will find it for our show notes. And yeah, and it goes into how it could still be more accessible. But yes,
Yes. Yes. Of course. And that's, I would say, similar to how it was in the US before Roe was overturned, of there were still many barriers, and we sort of assumed we had these certain protections, and then the carpet was pulled out from under us, and Canada has that possibility of happening, and anywhere in the world has that possibility happening. So yeah, just to say also, in terms of what would we say briefly to someone who is maybe not informed or unsure about their stance on abortion and viewing it as healthcare? I would first of all say that 1 in 4 people with uteruses in the United States have an abortion in their lifetime. It is a very common, very safe procedure. And there's a lot of misinformation about who gets abortions. For example, 59, they say between 59 and 61% of people who have abortions already are a parent. And part of their decision making is about how they are going to support their current child or children. Over 50% of people who get abortions are people of color. 75% are living below the poverty line or have low income. And this sense that we don't have parental leave, paid parental leave. Many people don't have that guarantee. Of course, the general healthcare system and support systems in the US are pretty abysmal. And so these are basic decisions that affect someone's entire life, their current family, how they're going to survive financially, all of this. So this sense that it's a really immediate and urgent decision that someone needs to make for themselves. And it is so personal based on that person's circumstances.
yeah. I remember sitting in a doctor's office and the doctor was saying to me, if you have any more children, you will die.
Mm.
And so you're really starting to, I already had 3 children at that point. That's right. And because they warned me after the second, and then I
Mm.
had one more because I chose that. And then to be sitting with the choice of my life, but also the impact for my children.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's incredibly personal of what you decide, what you're going to do with your uterus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, just mentioning that oftentimes people are thinking of this as a women's issue. And we know, of course, it goes beyond that people across the gender spectrum need abortions and are also likely to be met with so many more barriers and challenges if they are, for example, a trans man or a gender nonconforming person. There's if we just start to stack and add these challenges as we expand the sense of who is actually needing and accessing abortions.
So, how does yoga help someone all through the journey of abortion care? Like you said that you're an abortion doula. So where does your role start there? And sorry, I'm asking like a lot of things all at once. I want to get into like where our role would start as a yoga teacher if we're not an abortion doula as well.
Okay, well, first, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the role of the abortion doula and then sort of how that might be different or what might intersect with the role of a yoga teacher. So I did an abortion doula training, and it's really so wonderful to learn about the ins and outs of how does abortion actually work, demystifying the process of medication abortion or in-clinic surgical abortion. And a lot of the role of an abortion doula is to provide accurate information. And the good news is that you don't actually have to do an abortion doula training to know what resources you can direct people towards. So there are really, things are changing so fast with the political climate, but the Guttmacher Institute and the Center for Reproductive Rights, they have the updates on what states have what laws. And that is, first of all, a great tool that an abortion doula or a yoga teacher could point someone to if they need it. And then we learn about how to support folks in a very stigmatized and sometimes secretive experience of their life. And so, for example, as an abortion doula, one thing that I do is host people who are coming into New York to receive abortion care from a state where it's illegal. So they're traveling to New York. Again, as we were talking about just a few minutes ago, oftentimes these are folks who need to arrange childcare for their current children, take time off work, make an appointment in a state they've never been to, travel there, and the costs can be exorbitant. So one of the things that I do is give people a place to sleep and dinner as they're traveling and then accompany them to the clinic. All of these things that are practical and logistical challenges that me living in New York, I know how to do the subway and or call an Uber or whatever. But for someone who's in a really challenging and perhaps emotional situation, it makes a world of difference to have someone accompanying you through this process. Um, so those are a couple of the things that, an abortion doula specifically might do. But then a yoga teacher, firstly, we can know that if a student or client tells us that they have recently had an abortion or a miscarriage, that technically they are postpartum. So we can tailor the asana, the pranayama, all of the practices to meet their body where it is. And so one thing that I love to think about is tailoring or building a practice around apana vayu. And so I know a lot of folks know this already, but the vayus are the directions of energy, the direction of wind. So of course, for preparing for an abortion, we are going to be looking at the downward and outward direction of energy, apana vayu, so we can focus on the hips, the low back, the pelvic floor muscles. What are ways that we can create more circulation, more blood flow? How can we relax and lengthen the muscles both before and after an abortion? So, that could be anything from pelvic tilts, pelvic floor drops with breath, for those who know about that. The Supta Padangusthasana series can be really helpful to lengthen out inner, outer hip muscles, hamstrings. And then we would, for example, not do core work right now. We would not do inverted asanas right now. And it could also be a great time to incorporate mudras of the energetic seals we make with our hands of how can we help bring in that apana vayu through apana mudra. And then what might someone need afterwards? Nervous system regulation techniques, restorative postures to rest and calm the body. So that's a lot of information, but those are some examples of how you might approach abortion support.
I love this. Thank you so much. Also, that's amazing that you host people and help them in a really vulnerable time. If we are a yoga teacher and someone walks up to us, and obviously it's very vulnerable to say, "Hey, I just had a miscarriage or I just had an abortion, and I want to let you know because I'm hoping you can help me to modify in a yoga class." Thank you for all the information of like how we might build that practice for that person or really make it accessible for them. What are some of the words that like, okay, don't say things like this.
Yeah.
Instead, say something like this. How do we support emotionally and sort of with our language?
Yeah, that is a really important aspect. And so a few ground rules for support, I would say, would be to use non-assumptive, non-judgmental language. We don't know why this person got an abortion. We don't know what their experience was. So our main role is going to be listening to whatever information they do give us, which could be very minimal information, especially if it's in a group class setting. Probably not going to be going deep into their experience. We want to use reflective language. So if, for example, they say fetus, you say fetus. If they say uh, ended a pregnancy, you say ended a pregnancy. So that we're really mirroring back whatever we know of their experience to them. And, I was actually just having a conversation about this yesterday that we might want to think about some of the content and the context around maybe we don't use the language happy baby or child's pose in that exact moment. We can, of course, still use the asana and cue the asana. Maybe that's a better time to describe and cue how to move in and out of the asana rather than saying, everybody go into happy baby. That could be just, an example of something that we can take out in order to support that person in this vulnerable moment.
Oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. um, yeah. Okay. What are some of the words that people who are going through this are like, you know what, this was like a terrible thing that someone said. It's a thing that like gets said over and over again and it's not helpful.
Ugh. Ugh. Okay, so unfortunately, I have a lot of examples. So a lot of times when I'm working as an abortion doula, unfortunately, I'm often, and I'm a stranger to them, the only person, or maybe the only person they're confiding in about what's going on, or the only person who is supporting them, even if they're confiding in other people. I have heard, folks seeking abortions have the, person who, mm, I'll say, in the case that I'm thinking of, the boyfriend, blocks them, says, "Don't contact me again. You did this horrible thing." There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of pretty violent language, I would say. Some of it I don't want to, repeat too much on the podcast, but this sense of you're being selfish, you're making a decision that's harming another life. And what feels, I think, most challenging for folks receiving that is that they know their life best. They know their situation best. They know their body best. And it is not up to anyone else to say what the impact of their action is. The impact of their action, that's for them to experience. So I think, I guess, this judgmental language of how the action is perceived or the consequences of it.
And so how do you reassure someone in that moment when they're really receiving something like that from someone that they probably have in the past loved and trusted?
I sort of what I just said to you. I often say, you know your body best, you know your life best, you are making the right choice for you. And if you, almost always there's complicated emotions. I think the average person is not skipping into the clinic super jazzed and excited, right? Like there may be relief, there may be anxiety, there may be doubt, there may be fear, there may be any number of things. And so I try to mirror back whatever they're experiencing. If I pick them up from the clinic, I'll say something like, how's your body feeling? I don't say, how are you feeling after your recent abortion? I let them take the lead. Sometimes people want to talk a lot about their feelings and what's happening internally for them. And sometimes I have had, for example, we shared a car ride home after this person had their procedure, and they said, I would actually love to just be in silence. And so we were quiet. And then at the end, they said, I know that was just a silent car ride, but it meant so much to me. It helped me. It gave me what I needed. So I really try to let the other person take the lead. And I'll say that. I'll say, you take the lead. If you want to talk, we'll talk. If you want to hold hands, we'll hold hands. If you want to FaceTime your family or listen to a podcast, fine. So each person is just so very different in how they're experiencing it. And doing my best to really respond in the moment with that person.
Have you seen some yoga offerings that really support people in community who have received abortion care, or is it more one-on-one, or what's your experience with that?
Yeah. At this point, unfortunately, I mostly see it one-on-one. And I only say unfortunately in that I think it would be great to have multiple options. One-on-one can be exactly what someone wants, but to be with other folks who have experienced similar things is not as common as I wish that it were. And partly that's for a very important reason, that it's being criminalized. And I personally, like, for example, I use Signal to communicate, via messaging about abortion. I use DuckDuckGo, which is an encrypted platform for searching, Google searches, things like that. Because there will be efforts to criminalize people, especially traveling across state lines, and people helping folks travel across state lines. So there's a lot of fear about coming together and being more open about sharing experiences. But I will say there's a great group called Shout Your Abortion, and it's more about art and performance and theater. So they create pieces and do these pieces in public. And that can be a really great way. They're on Instagram. So even if someone doesn't want to contribute directly, it can feel really meaningful for them to see that vocal and external sense of storytelling.
That's amazing. What a great idea to get the message out there and do it through art. Hey, connected yoga teachers, I'm popping in here for a moment to talk about our amazing sponsor, OfferingTree. I had to laugh this week because, as many of you know, I'm at a new job, part-time job at Mawikwadong. It's an Indigenous friendship center in my local community. And we got talking about signing people up for offerings and workshops and things at our place. And I started talking about OfferingTree. And I just cannot say enough about it. People there were like, well, wait a minute. Does it do this? Does it do this? What about a waiver form? What about email? What about a website? Like, how can people click and pay? And I was like, it will do all of that. And I love that it does all of that because it saves me and other yoga teachers and small business owners time and money. OfferingTree, if you haven't heard about it already, it's an all-in-one platform that will handle your schedule, payments, even your website, Zoom links, time zones. And the best part is it's really all very easy to use. You don't have to be afraid of the tech part of it. And the team over at OfferingTree, not only do they care about the planet and social justice, and they're just amazing people who are giving back to their own community, but they're also really great at helping when you have like a question or a tech issue with your website or your scheduling software. So imagine what it would feel like to spend less time doing admin and more time doing what you love, which is teaching yoga. Make sure if you're going to check it out, you ask for the 14-day free trial. And then also we have a discount code for you over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. That's OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Okay, let's get back into our conversation with Sasha. When someone lives in a state where abortion care isn't available, where do you tell them to go to look online, and how do they do that safely?
Yes, great question. So again, I personally would use DuckDuckGo. There may be other encrypted search engines, but I actually don't know of them. And you can go to abortionfinder.com. Actually, let me just make sure that that is the actual website. Abortionfinder.org. Yes. And that will give you the information about where abortion, like closest state. And also important to remember that right now in the US, it is legal to get abortion pills mailed to you in any state. So that would be for someone that has is a 12 weeks or less into the pregnancy. So that, for some people that goes by quite quickly, sometimes without even knowing they're pregnant. So if you're looking for more of an in-clinic option, then abortionfinder.org is good. There's also the New York Abortion Access Fund for folks in New York, and then the National Network of Abortion Funds that folks can get direct help in paying for both the procedure and the travel expenses, the lodging expenses, which a lot of people are accessing. In fact, since Roe was overturned, the networks that fund abortions have reported a 39% increase in requests for abortion support because there are so many more costs involved now.
Wow. It's really making me think of like the healthcare system and just the many stories that I keep seeing about people who need an abortion for a medical reason or are choosing an abortion for whatever reason, and not having that available.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just to say, I always think of another horrific aspect to all of this. There's in the US, there's something called the Hyde Amendment, which is a specifically racist amendment that bars the use of federal funds to pay for abortions. So if you have Medicaid, you can't use it. If you are a what's the word that I'm looking for? I think it's Peace Corps. Yeah, if you're a Peace Corps person, you can't use it. Federal employees can't use their insurance to pay for abortions. So there's just barrier after barrier.
This is wild to me. I'm finding out so much about the US healthcare system in the last month, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I have friends and family in the US, and I feel like I sort of knew, but wow. It's shocking how much you can cripple a society when you don't allow basic healthcare.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's quite intentional.
It is. I think we're going to see a rise in it. I linked to a podcast in a previous episode that is just sticking in my mind. I forget the name of the title of the podcast, but it's on The Great Simplification. I'll link to it again. And it's all about how our fertility rates in the world globally are dropping, and how countries are starting to try and get ahead of it. Some think with putting like overturning Roe, trying to get people to have more babies. But if you don't have this support system, it's not going to help people.
No, it's scary stuff.
Yeah. I wanted to ask what this looks like in terms of marketing. I hate to even use this term, but obviously it's really important to sort of get the word out there that this is support that people can access. Like, how do you do that and navigate? I'm guessing you get a bunch of online trolls when you do that. Maybe not. I'm just guessing. And like, how do you let people know that this is available?
Yes. Oh, okay. Great. Yes. It's a challenge. So for example, I have on my website a page that says abortion support and asks folks if you need abortion support, you can email me here. Do not use the word abortion. Just say that you are seeking support, and once we establish contact, we're going to move to a more secure platform. So there are a lot of hoops to jump through for folks to just start the process of support. For example, the organization that I volunteer for is called Haven, which is where I host folks coming from out of town. We don't even have a website. And so most people are referred to us through the New York Abortion Access Fund. And it would be challenging for someone to reach out on their own in order to do that. An amazing thing about Haven is that, well, I'll say that partly because there's a thorough vetting process, and I also will interview potential volunteers. There's a home visit where you need to go and see the space and have an interview and reference calls, or referral calls, I should say, to make sure that we don't have infiltrators of, anti-abortion people. And luckily, so far, we have not had that problem at Haven, but it is very much an underground situation it's not something that you can easily Google. And it's challenging for folks to know what websites can I trust? So that's, I would say, probably my number one thing of having a couple of websites more publicly known. And I will say people know to Google Planned Parenthood, and then they can kind of connect the dots from there. But it is I mean, most people don't know what an abortion doula is or how to access one. And it's really challenging to find a safe way for abortion doulas and a safe way for abortion seekers to connect.
Yeah. Do you deal with online hate or people who are really misinformed coming after you
You
when
know
you
what?
do share?
Uh, I personally haven't. I don't know why that is. I'm surprised.
Okay, well, that's sort of, I feel like if someone was like, yes, I want to do this, this work's really important to me, I feel like it might be something that holds them back where they're like, I just don't know if I could take the online hate.
Totally. And I will say that, for example, volunteering with an organization is a great way to have anonymity. You would not need to have any social media or public documentation about your involvement with this work because it's all through just, connecting. There's, one person really who's like, okay, this person needs to be picked up from this clinic at this time. And it's all very private.
Right. Okay. Good to know.
Mhm.
Don't don't worry. Don't worry yourself if you're not getting the online hate that you thought was coming.
Yeah, that's good advice.
um is there anything else that you would say to the yoga teacher who feels like they want to get involved with this? They want to, especially like we have a lot of listeners who work in the pelvic health world. It might not even be right on their doorstep right now, but let's just say they feel like, yeah, they want to do a little more learning, get educated, or maybe go further with it. Where would you suggest they start?
Yeah, great question. I would first invite folks to think about. I usually think there's kind of three buckets or three areas where people can provide support. One is practical support, and that's what we've talked a lot about of accurate information. Language translation is a big one. Having Spanish speakers be able to fully understand what's happening throughout their abortion experience, setting up appointments, transportation, childcare, to all of those practical components are in one bucket. Then there's the emotional support would be in another bucket of listening and validating, helping with either like distraction tools or calming tools. And then the third bucket would be physical support, which is about nourishment and water and rest and maybe herbal support, if people are interested in that. So once a yoga teacher has a sense of, do you want to do all of those things, one of those things? What's your capacity? An option would be to do an abortion doula training. And I would recommend birthing advocacy doula trainings. It's a Black owned, queer run training group and holistic abortions. And they work with decolonized models of community care. And that's a great way to learn about herbal support before, during, and after abortions. So you'll get a really good scope of what the possibilities are with a training like that. And then I think it's a matter of reaching out and doing, honestly, a lot of research about who's in your area who's already doing this. Who are the doula collectives that already exist? Um, are there yoga teachers who already talk about perhaps postnatal care or miscarriage support or abortion support, and contacting them and asking, how can I support you doing the work? Do you have an overflow where I could pick some of that up, or do you more so need like texting support? There's so many roles that people can play, and so I think first just sensing what's the capacity and what are you most interested in, and sometimes it's just having enough knowledge and resources that if someone comes to you at some point, which they probably will, saying that they need an abortion or they just had an abortion, you know the basics of how to get them the resources they need and the information they need.
That's fantastic. Thank you. What would you say to the person who's having a listen and has somewhere in their past made the decision to seek abortion care or are possibly looking at that now? Like, what are some of the words that you would share with someone when they're facing something so personal? Like, are
Mhm.
there some things that you would share, like words of, I don't know, words that would help?
Mm, mhm. Firstly, I would say that the how people report their experience after an abortion is, again, often mixed and complicated, but very seldom is the main emotion or experience regret. Most people, when they make this decision, again, they know their particular circumstances. Um, I was working with a young person who told me that the reason why she was getting an abortion was because she knew that she had things to do and places to go in terms of her going to college and having a career, and that maybe someday she wanted to be a parent, but not right now. And that there are these larger pictures. And so I would just invite people to zoom out of the larger picture of their life and know that this is such a common and safe procedure. And that, of course, they are the only one who can make the decision for themselves. But there are so many people who have made this decision and known that it was perhaps a hard or challenging decision to make, but it was what allowed them to live the life that they want for themselves.
Thank you for all of that. That's yeah, I feel like we can keep doing better whether we're supporting a friend or standing at the front of a yoga class where we don't know people's stories. If it's 1 in 4 people, we are teaching to people who have gotten abortion care. We definitely are in our group class, and it's really important that we're educated enough on like why that's necessary in a society. If you There's a great book as well. I think it's called like Looking for Jane. Do you know what book I'm talking about?
No, I don't, but I want to know more about it.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good book. I think it's based on the abortion system in Canada, but I could be
Mm,
wrong. And that was one of the things because it was so underground, then people would call and say, "Hi, I'm looking for Jane." It was
mhm.
a friend who recommended it. Abortions have happened since humans were making decisions about their own bodies, and they will continue to happen whether that's supported by the healthcare system or not. And so it's so um I just thank you so much for doing this work that is community care. It's like you talked about herbalism. This existed many years ago, long before we had hospitals. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I Where would you invite our listeners to go if they want to connect more with you?
Yes, yes. I am on the Instagram. I'm at Sasha.Sigel. My website is sashasigel.com. And I have virtual yoga classes, yoga for pelvic health. I have an endometriosis yoga circle, which meets monthly. And then I also offer in person classes in New York and private and individual or private yoga and Reiki sessions, which we didn't talk too much about. But yeah, and I really welcome people to reach out also if they have questions about wanting to get more involved in the movement for reproductive justice. I love talking about it. So I'm very happy to answer questions, and also just to, reflect back what you said, Shannon, of this has been happening since the beginning of time. This is not new. This is something that we have the right to, and our bodies have been doing since the beginning of humans being alive. So it's feels challenging sometimes to talk about, and also is part of humanity.
Hmm. Is there anything else, like some fact or just like story, or you're like, oh, yeah, there's this one other thing that I hope yoga teachers understand about abortion care?
Yeah. The one other thing that I feel really passionate about is whether it's through the role of an abortion doula and very direct involvement, or like you said, we're constantly teaching to folks who have had abortions or will have an abortion, that part of our role can be to actually make this not a traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be a traumatic experience. There's all of that is coming externally. The shame and the stigma is not from the experience itself. It's being put upon us by others. And so I find it really, really meaningful to allow someone to have their own experience with it. And for example, I'll pick someone up from the clinic and they're feeling okay. So we go grab a slice of New York pizza. It's the first New York pizza they've ever had. We go sit on a bench, we watch a movie, and maybe not right at that moment, but perhaps by the end of the evening, like they're able to have an enjoyable end to the day and feel okay in their body and feel supported. And that makes a huge, huge difference in how their body and their brain processes abortion care. And then how we talk about it to others from there. And it continues on and on. So I really love this possibility of making it not a traumatic experience.
Thank you so much for this. That's really, all of a sudden, I was just sitting here thinking, can you imagine if we put this kind of judgment on something like, okay, you're going for knee surgery. Well, that's terrible. Everyone who gets knee surgery is an awful person. And,
Right.
and, and instead, you're going for a procedure that you need, you need.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great example of just this is a medical procedure which some people need and some people don't. The
Yeah.
end.
If someone's like, oh, this is totally different, knee surgery is completely different, tell me how.
Right, right. Would love to know.
Yeah. Explain that to me. What if you're like, I really need like laser surgery on my eyes and that will help me to see better? Well, anyway,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Uh, if our connected yoga teachers have questions, they can post them in the comments, but they can also reach out to you.
Yes.
And I've learned a lot today. So if they have more questions, we can invite you back on the podcast. And I'm just incredibly grateful for the work that you're doing. Given the political climate that we're both living in right now, it's really important.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm really I'm going to be tuned into what happens with our incoming administration in the US and in Canada. And I think the one thing that gives me hope is that people resist and people connect and start talking and finding ways to take care of each other. So I'm sorry that we have to do that, but I'm glad that we can do that together.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I have to close with one more thing. I
Yeah.
was talking with a fairly conservative voter from Canada, and when Roe was overturned, I was like, I work with a lot of pelvic health professionals, and a lot of them are based out of the US. And of course, like sharing my kind of horror and disappointment of what was happening in the US and seeing the impact um, on humans, like seeing the harm that was being done to humans and sharing this with this conservative voter in Canada and them saying, well, that'll never happen here. And I just thought,
Oh,
well, I hope you're right.
right.
And please educate yourself if that's the way you're thinking right now in Canada. Please state, like, make sure you speak up really loud,
Hmm.
and you ask your representatives, your politicians, their stance on that. And if they won't give you an answer, if they skirt around it, that's a pretty strong answer.
Right. That's your answer. Hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you. And this sense of it won't happen to us or it won't happen to me. Ooh, we're pretty far past that. We're living in scary times, genocidal times, and yeah, there's nothing to take for granted anymore.
No. No, there isn't. And what really fuels me right now is like watching collective care like in action. So I'm so grateful that you're part of this. Like people can sit back and be like, "Oh my gosh, the world is terrible and there's nothing I could do," but you are digging in and being like, "Yep, I have some time. I can drive someone around. They can stay at my place."
Totally, totally. And again, it doesn't even have to be that big. It could be making a $5 donation if someone's able to an abortion fund or, anything. But yes, I think that is the counter to hopelessness is action. And we're doing it and we're going to keep doing it no matter what.
Thank you so much, Sasha.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It was so good to be here.
Thank you so much, Connected Yoga Teachers, for tuning in today. Thank you, Sasha, for all of this wealth of information and inspiration. Sasha and I recorded this episode around the beginning of January of 2025, and I'm sitting here recording it near the end of April. It's going to go out to you in May, and it's a bit shocking how much things have changed for our US friends and worldwide, really, with the new administration in the US. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. This conversation with Sasha was a real reminder of how powerful our role can be as yoga teachers, not just in guiding movement, but also in really holding space for care, autonomy, and truth. There are some key takeaways that I'm really holding on to after today's episode. And I loved listening back to this. So I listened, obviously, when I was doing the interview. And I love having a listen back to really see, like, what are the key takeaways for me? One is abortion is healthcare. And it's more common than many of us realize. Two is small acts of presence, like listening or making someone a meal, can mean the world to someone navigating abortion care. Three is, as yoga teachers, we can educate ourselves and support in ways that are emotional, physical, or practical based on our skills and our capacity. And number 4 key takeaway is that language matters. I love how Sasha talked about meeting your students with the words they use and letting them guide the emotional tone of their story. I feel like we can all do this, whether it relates to abortion care or anything else they're sharing with us. If you're looking to learn more or get involved, Sasha shared some great resources and trainings to explore. You can find them on Instagram at Sasha Sigel or on their website at sashasigel.com, and I'll make sure to link to those in our show notes. The show notes are over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/396. Also, I want to talk about the 3 links that I promised. One, that podcast called Aborsh. It's a podcast about abortion in Canada, and it offers deep insights into reproductive care in a different context. It's a fantastic podcast to listen to. The other resource I highly recommend is a book called Looking for Jane. It's a gripping read that explores the underground network of women helping women access abortions in the 1960s. And then the podcast that I just cannot get out of my head, it's called The Great Simplification, and I'll link to the episode that I had to listen to, which is called The Baby Bust: How the Toxicity Crisis Could Cause the Next Economic Crash. It's a really thought-provoking discussion about long-time societal impacts of what we're seeing right now regarding fertility rates. And you might be thinking, wait, how is this impacting us? But trust me, go have a listen to that episode. I would love to talk about it. If you do have a listen, reach out to me and tell me your thoughts on it. It was incredibly thought-provoking. If you are enjoying the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, or if you have feedback of any kind, I'm here to listen always. It's great if you can comment on the show notes page for each episode. That kind of keeps it really organized. So that's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/396. Now, if it's a random comment, you might want to drop that in our Facebook group. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, you can see the join button on our homepage. Or you can tag me on Instagram at The Connected Yoga Teacher. Thank you to our entire amazing team over here who brings this podcast to life each week. And thank you, dear listener. You really are the heart of the podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here and that you hung out and had a listen to today's episode. And of course, as I wrap up here, I would love to share a question with you. I would like to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?